The beauty of a well-fleshed out and diverse power system is that there's tons of different ways to be powerful. If a universe has a narrow-minded and singular kind of way to get powerful, the show can be boring. Oh cool, your fireball is now the strongest fireball out of all the fireballs, awesome. But when a show gives characters a multitude of different ways to be powerful, it allows the characters to be as unique as their powers are. And when we're talking about shonen anime, a lot of individuality comes from your powers. Shino Aburame is the way that he is because his powers are supposed to kind of make you feel icky. I mean, he quite literally has bugs in his skin. Kisame's power is supposed to be incredibly intimidating because he himself is a shark. And the list of characters' character traits being influenced by their abilities goes on. Opinions about characters are built as much on their on-screen feats and personalities as they are on their abilities. But what happens when a massive group of people shares the same ability? Well, that's the case with a lot of dojutsu, specifically the Byakugan and the Sharingan. And while unfortunately the Byakugan doesn't offer much in the way of diversity between individual users, the Sharingan absolutely does. Now, this is mostly due to the fact that the Sharingan has way more abilities tied to it than the Byakugan. See, because the Byakugan has one ability that it does really well, and that is that Byakugan wielders can see through basically anything. However, the Sharingan has a plethora of abilities that are highly tailored to the individual with the Sharingan. However, if I was going to sit here and break down the individual abilities of the Sharingan, I would say that they were genjutsu, extrasensory perception, the ability to copy ninjutsu and physical moves, individual MS abilities, and the Susanoo. And that's just the wide overarching categories, and that's already much more than the Byakugan. But I received an email recently that asked me a rather intriguing question, and that question was, which wielder of the Sharingan is best with each of the individual abilities of the Sharingan? That is to say, that which Sharingan user is the strongest at something like Sharingan-based genjutsu, or perception, or the copy ability, or which Sharingan user has the strongest Susanoo or MS abilities. And as I got to thinking about it, I realized it's a pretty diverse cast. See, because while a lot of people would sit here and say, well, Sasuke clears on every single category, that's just not true. In fact, as I was going attribute by attribute of the Sharingan, I realized every single category has a different answer. There's no repeats. And while you can make an argument for a couple of people to repeat, my gut is telling me there doesn't need to be. And that's kind of crazy. An entire universe with tons of people who use the Sharingan, and every single one of them is the best at one aspect of the Sharingan. That's kind of cool. But before we get into how cool that is, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me talking about some other cool things, guys, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you like the idea of me talking about cool anime, you're gonna love my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you guys want to look like a cool person who watches anime, go ahead and wander into my anime merch store, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. So, the Sharingan, one of the most interesting powers in any anime ever. What once started as a red eye with a couple of Tomei slowly graduated into a Mangekyo Sharingan that eventually evolved into an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan that finally became a Rinnegan, an Rinne Sharingan. The evolution of the Sharingan is truly an epic story. And that evolution didn't only come in its form, but also in the abilities it gave its users. See, in the very beginning of Naruto, the Sharingan appeared to just be a way that somebody would be able to dodge incoming attacks. That is to say that all we really knew about the Sharingan in the early days of Naruto is that it could copy movements and it gave you extrasensory perception. And we learned that from Kakashi and Sasuke in the early days of his Sharingan development. But as time progressed and characters like Itachi, Sasuke, Kakashi, Obito, all the Uchihas began to show their MS abilities, we truly began to understand what the Sharingan was all about. And that was unrelenting power. But genuinely, the most interesting thing about the Sharingan is that it's as unique as the person using it. While at its very core, the Sharingan does grant the same abilities to anybody who has a Sharingan, and these basic abilities can be broken down into two categories, which is the Eye of Insight and the Eye of Hypnotism, with the Eye of Insight's ability granting the user the ability to track chakra, kind of like the Byakugan, but not as well, but still to the degree where they're able to see through things like smoke, trees, rocks, and even see if somebody's under the influence of genjutsu. Second ability of the Eye of Insight being extrasensory perception, which grants the user the ability to do things like read somebody's lips from far away, see things down to a cellular level. Yes, Sasuke's Sharingan can see things on a cellular level, track fast-moving objects that allow them to fight at incredibly high speeds, or dodge incredibly high-speed attacks, or even give them access to what many believe is a future sight of sorts. The Sharingan user is able to perfectly anticipate what attack is going to come based off how muscles might be tensing in somebody's arm, giving them the ability to dodge an attack before it's been launched without actually seeing the future. On top of this, if a Sharingan wielder is able to see the hand signs of a person they're fighting against, they can anticipate what ninjutsu, genjutsu, or technique they're currently forming. However, they can truly go one step further than that. See, any technique that a Sharingan user sees somebody else use, they can also copy, so long as they have the physical ability to do it. Obviously, Sasuke watching Haku use Ice Release wouldn't teach him how to use Ice Release because it's a Kekkei Genkai he doesn't have. But there's a reason that Kakashi got his name as the Copy Ninja. Any taijutsu or ninjutsu that Kakashi saw some other ninja do, he copied. Sometimes so fast that he would be able to fire off that technique at the person using that technique against him, like he did in his battle against Zabuza. Now, those three are the abilities of the Eye of Insight, while the Eye of Hypnotism more has to refer to the genjutsu abilities of the Sharingan. Now, while every single Sharingan has the ability to use the ability Genjutsu Sharingan, those Sharingan abilities are kind of hazy. See, the base genjutsu abilities of the Sharingan are as unique as the individual using them, though the way that the base genjutsu of the Sharingan is usually used is whenever a Sharingan wielder makes eye contact with somebody who isn't a Sharingan wielder, they're able to use a genjutsu on them that forces them to divulge information or act in a specific way against their will, and sometimes without them even noticing. The best example of something like this being done is when people like Madara or Obito use this Sharingan ability on tailed beasts. And in the most extreme circumstances, when somebody is completely under control of the Genjutsu Sharingan, their eyes will also become Sharingan. This is why Kurama's eyes were Sharingan when he was destroying the village on Naruto's birthday. So those are basically all the base abilities of a Sharingan, not an MS. Well, obviously an MS can introduce two individual new abilities to each eye and the Susanoo. That is not only rare, but also incredibly individualistic and based off the personality of the person who manifests them. So with all of the rules and abilities of the Sharingan now in plain view, let's get into the meat of today's video, talking about which aspect of the Sharingan each wielder of the Sharingan is best at. And there's really no good place to start, so I'm just going to start with genjutsu. That is to say, which wielder of the Sharingan was best at the genjutsu aspect of having a Sharingan. And this is actually surprisingly tough to answer. See, because when you think about Sharingan and genjutsu, the way your brain usually goes is directly to Shisui, right? And while that wouldn't be a bad answer, in fact, it's probably the correct answer, almost every other wielder of the Sharingan has shown incredible genjutsu feats. Like when it comes to just the base form genjutsu Sharingan, the answer for greatest genjutsu user is probably Madara, as Madara was shown not only being able to control Kurama with his genjutsu, but also all of the tailed beasts to a minor degree, and simultaneously, mind you. Putting Kurama under genjutsu isn't a feat that only Madara has ever pulled off, because Obito also did it. On top of that, Obito is also responsible for using a Kodowa Matsukame-like genjutsu against Yagura, and through the power of this genjutsu, Obito was able to make Yagura a bloodthirsty dictator for the majority of his rule as the 4th Mizukage. And the power of this genjutsu was so similar, it led Tsunade to believe that Obito might be related to Shisui in some capacity. Well, it led her to believe that the genjutsu used on Yagura was related to the Kodowa Matsukame in some capacity. And therefore, people like Obito have not only placed people like Kurama under genjutsu with the base form of the Sharingan, but also have shown genjutsu-like abilities comparable to the strongest genjutsu in all of Naruto, Kodowa Matsukame. However, in circumstances such as these, it's usually best to go with your gut, because when you're talking about the strongest ever user of genjutsu from the Sharingan, the right answer is unfortunately probably Shisui, though you could very easily throw people like Itachi in here because Tsukiyomi was repeatable, unlike Kodowa Matsukame. Well, Kodowa Matsukame is repeatable, but not nearly as repeatable as Tsukiyomi. And with the recent revelation that Tsukiyomi has the ability to kill the person cast into Tsukiyomi, Itachi does definitely deserve at least an honorable mention. But wars were fought over Shisui's eyeballs, so we're gonna have to go with Shisui here. Shisui is obviously the wielder of the Kodowa Matsukame in both eyes. And while we don't know a ton about the Kodowa Matsukame, it is pretty widely believed in anime circles that both of Shisui's eyes operated in different capacities. See, many believe that because every other person outside of Shisui clearly had two separate MS abilities, even if they had the same name, like Obito, as Obito's left Kamui ability pulls him into the Kamui dimension, and his right Kamui ability pulls other things outside of his body into the Kamui dimension. And thus, people believe that Shisui's two Kodowa Matsukame operate separately. That is to say that they both have the ability to put you under a genjutsu so deep you believe it's real, all without making eye contact with you, though one has the ability to put you under a genjutsu so deep you can't be broken out of it, while the other you can be broken out of. And the one with the deeper genjutsu has the 10-year cooldown, while the other one is less. And that Danzo got the less powerful genjutsu that can be used more often, and Itachi got the more powerful genjutsu that can be used less often. However, the Kodo Matsukame aren't the only genjutsu abilities that Shisui had. See, as we learned in the first of Itachi's light novels, The Book of Bright Light, Shisui has an MS genjutsu ability that he was able to use against Mukai Kohinata that wasn't the Kodo Matsukame, but it was powerful enough to overpower the genjutsu resistance conferred by him being a Byakugan wielder. And because Shisui, at a very young age, mind you, was able to place Mukai Kohinata under genjutsu, Mukai Kohinata proceeded to cut his own stomach open because of the seal placed on him as a member of the root. So even without the usage of the Kodo Matsukame, Shisui is a very talented genjutsu user. And thus, even though it's obvious and somewhat boring, the best genjutsu user of the Sharingan of all time goes to Shisui. But what about a topic that's a bit more contentious, a little bit harder to answer? What about answering the question of who has the best extrasensory perception out of any Sharingan wielder ever? I mean, Madara was able to battle against giants like Hashirama for 24 hours at a time. And as Hashirama had a healing factor that Madara didn't, Madara couldn't afford to be hit. Not to mention that Madara was able to battle against 20,000 members of the Shinobi Alliance all at once, all without really being hit. And amongst those 20,000 people were people like Gaara, a Kazekage, Naruto, a future Hokage, all of which Madara was able to battle against with little to no effort. And while I would be lying to you if I said that Madara's extrasensory perception is anything but off the charts insane, unfortunately, when it comes down to extrasensory perception granted by the Sharingan, Madara's not number one. See, Madara just kind of has extrasensory perception. With no eyes whatsoever, only through the power of a newly acquired Sage Mode, Madara was able to battle against EMS Sasuke in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War and win. However, ironically, when it comes to the best wielder of the extrasensory perception granted by the Sharingan, that crown does go to Sasuke. See, Sasuke is without a doubt the fastest Uchiha ever. He's also the strongest Uchiha ever. And what comes along with him being the strongest Uchiha ever is a lot of impressive feats. And while Sasuke has really been anything but impressive in Boruto, and while technically with the power of his EMS and 6-Tome Rinnegan he wasn't able to track the chakra rods Ishiki was throwing at him, no Uchiha in the history of Uchihas would have been able to do that. So we're not gonna talk about the Ishiki fight because Sasuke dodges a grand total of nothing at all during that fight. What we are gonna talk about is the fact that Sasuke, just like Naruto, was able to run the ones with a fused Momoshiki in base form. Now, fused Momoshiki is stronger and faster than anybody who appears in Naruto, point blank period. And Sasuke was not only able to dodge his attacks, but land some of his own, all of which wouldn't have been possible without the usage of the extrasensory perception of his Sharingan. However, there's also the fact that Sasuke is confirmed able to see on a cellular level with his Sharingan, something that we've never heard of any other Sharingan user being able to do ever. Tie that into the fact that he was also able to run the ones with Kaguya, and yeah, he's probably the best at sensing people out of any Sharingan user. But there's a lot more to the extrasensory perception abilities of the Sharingan than dodging and moving quick. As one of the most talked about topics when it comes to talking about the extrasensory perception of the Sharingan is its ability to copy movements and jutsu. However, I'd more like to separate the category of perception into speed, dodging, those kinds of things, and the ability to copy, as they are kind of inherently separate. So while Sasuke absolutely holds the crown of fastest and best at dodging and best at looking super duper close to things, I think we all know who holds on to the title belt for the copying aspect. And that would be none other than the copy ninja himself, Kakashi. I mean, this one is obvious, it's literally in his name. See, one of the most common misconceptions about the copying aspects of the Sharingan is that you can only copy someone's hand signs. And while that is true, if you've ever done the hand signs for a jutsu in front of Kakashi, he now knows the jutsu, which is how Kakashi was able to copy over 1,000 jutsu and got his second nickname, Kakashi of the 1,000 Jutsu. But the Sharingan's copy ability also allows you to copy physical movement. The best example of this is that after Rock Lee pulls up on Sasuke in the beginning of the Chunin exams arc and kicks him up in the air fire and hits him with a lotus, Sasuke, because he has his Sharingan activated while Rock Lee is punching his teeth in, is actually able to copy that move. Now, did he give Rock Lee any credit for that? No, he just called the move Lion's Barrage. But without Rock Lee showing him how to do that move, he never would have known how to do it. Now, Kakashi is definitely more privy to copying jutsu than physical movements, and truly, one of the only times that we ever actually see Kakashi copy anything is in his battle against Zabuza, where Zabuza is trying to do all 44 hand signs for Water Dragon Bullet, and Kakashi, through the usage of his Sharingan, copies all 44 of those hand signs to counter out Zabuza's Water Dragon Bullet, which has led a lot of people to ask the very logical question, is Kakashi really the copy ninja? I mean, if one of the only times we ever see Kakashi copy anything is in the battle against Zabuza, who's literally the first bad guy, is he really copying at such a crazy pace? And on top of all this, Kakashi usually just uses Raikiri, which he created. But the real answer as to why Kakashi doesn't copy jutsus all that often is because most of the people he's fighting, he can't copy their jutsus. Think about who Kakashi really fights throughout the duration of Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. Almost every single member of the Akatsuki uses uncopyable moves. Kakashi can't copy anything from Kakuzu, from Sasori, from Deidara, from Hidan, from Nagato, from Konan. And while he could technically copy a couple of Obito's moves, Obito is just using Kamui the majority of the time, which he can't really copy because he has the wrong Kamui eye. Maybe. That's a fuzzy area. So when it really comes down to it, the only person whose techniques he probably could have copied reliably would have been Kisame's, or maybe Itachi's. But he wouldn't be able to copy things like Tsukiyomi or Amaterasu. He would just been able to copy the Great Fireball techniques. So the problem isn't really with Kakashi. The problem is with Naruto's bad guys having either bloodline-specific abilities or just being sharks. Can't copy immortality, you can't copy Rinnegan abilities you don't have, and thus Kakashi had to stick to the supposed 1,000 jutsus that he's copied from his time previous to Naruto. And therefore, technically, while we might have seen people like Sasuke copy more over the duration of Naruto, for the sheer fact that Kakashi has copied over 1,000 jutsu, though obviously he doesn't use them all, it's gotta go to Kakashi. Now, with all of the base abilities of the Sharingan out of the way, that is genjutsu, perception, and copying, you can start getting into the heavy-hitting stuff, like MS abilities. Now, the way that I'm going to approach this is just sheer strength. What person who awoke in MS had the strongest set of MS abilities? And to me, this one feels rather obvious, though it'll probably end up contentiously. See, a lot of people's gut reaction to who has the strongest MS abilities is probably Itachi, and that's kind of warranted, but also kind of not. See, I'm talking about MS abilities, not Susanoo. So the individual abilities that apply to both eyes, but not the abilities that apply to the nose. When Izanagi washed his face, Susanoo came from his nose. And when you break it down, Itachi's MS abilities are strong, but not as strong as a lot of other people on this list. See, when it comes down to it, Tsukiyomi is probably the most versatile genjutsu in Naruto, period. Itachi was able to give his girlfriend her entire life, 60 plus years, in a built-out world that he controlled. And when she died of old age in that universe, mind you, these 60 plus years took less than a second in real-world time, her brain died right along with it. Meaning that Itachi, through the power of Tsukiyomi, can and has killed people. But Itachi doesn't need 60 years. 72 hours was enough to put Kakashi in a coma he wouldn't have woken up from unless Tsunade, the world's greatest healer, came back to Konoha. And you could say the same about Sasuke. I mean, Tsukiyomi is so incredible that the end goal of Naruto is to use it on the entire world. But unfortunately, Itachi's other MS ability is Amaterasu. And while Amaterasu in premise is very broken, as it allows the user to cast black flames that burn you until you're ash or until they turn the flames off, Itachi hits one person and one person alone with his Amaterasu for his entire life. And that person is Yoji Aburame. And that happens in a light novel, and Yoji Aburame is only hit by it because his bugs are forcing him to stand still because Itachi used Tsukiyomi on the bugs to make them still. I mean, technically Itachi does also hit Edo Nagato with Amaterasu, but he just pushes it off his body. Technically, he hits a frog's stomach with it, but the frog's stomach was also all around him in all directions. I mean, he does hit Nagato's dog summon, but it's also massive. The short and skinny of it is Amaterasu's not that great. Amaterasu, however, does get a lot better if you have something like Kagutsuchi that allows you to control the shape of your flame, so you can do things like apply Amaterasu to a wind-style Rasen Shuriken, make Amaterasu arrows with your Susanoo, or just apply Amaterasu to your Susanoo ribcage. So when it comes to MS abilities, I would say, ironically, Sasuke is probably a little bit stronger than Itachi, though they could be considered even because obviously Tsukiyomi carries a lot of weight. Now, some people might answer this by saying that it's Shisui. I mean, if Shisui has the the strongest genjutsu of all time in his 2MS, and his MS ability is that strongest genjutsu, then it's safe to assume that it's Shisui, right? No. Shisui, at worst, has 2 genjutsu he can use once a decade. At best, he has 1 genjutsu he can use once a decade, and 1 genjutsu he can use every couple of weeks? No, the real answer is Obito. Kamui is broken. Obito, through the power of just 1 Kamui, is able to achieve complete intangibility. And while obviously Obito's circumstances make Kamui a lot stronger than it should be, as obviously he's able to spam it because of half of his body being made by white Zetsu cells, but Kakashi's Kamui Eye is also incredibly powerful. And when you put the 2 of these Kamui Eyes together, it's insanely broken. There's a reason they were split up. See, Kakashi's Kamui Eye is a one-hit kill. Whether I'm able to rip you in half by placing one part of you in the Kamui dimension and keeping the other half on Earth, or I'm able to get the entirety of you in the Kamui dimension and you don't have interdimensional travel to get out, either way you die. But if I have Obito's Kamui, I have complete and total intangibility, which means anything you throw at me will just go through me. And then when I want to, this fight ends with a chakra rod in your neck. Now, obviously, people like Konan figured out a way to break this intangibility, and there is weaknesses, but unless you have 6 billion paper tags and a couple of weeks to prepare, you're probably gonna lose. So when it comes down to the strongest set of MS abilities in all of Naruto, I'm giving it to Obito and his Kamui, which leaves us with just one thing. Probably the thing that the majority of you are curious about my answer to. Who has strongest Susanoo? Now, while I've technically done entire videos about this a lifetime ago, it's been a while since I really sat down and analyzed who has the strongest Susanoo in all of Naruto. And just like with a lot of these other categories, this one, it's a tough one to answer, because every Susanoo, except for Sasuke's, has something special about it. I'm kidding. Sasuke Susanoo has the bow, which is very powerful when combined with Kagutsuchi. All right, leave me alone. And also Indra's arrow, which happened once. But when you're talking about all of the Susanoo's we've seen throughout all of Naruto, every single one of them is insanely powerful. Hagoromo and Indra Susanoo's were some of the biggest Susanoo's we've ever seen. And while Indra Susanoo is canon, Hagoromo's isn't. Speaking of non-canon Susanoo's, another non-canon Susanoo is Shisui Susanoo, where he wielded a green spear and had the ability to shoot out chakra needles. And while that sounds very powerful, when it comes to the grand scope of the Susanoo's we've seen, it actually might be the weakest. Madara Susanoo was probably the biggest out of anybody's from the modern era, and he wielded 2 katanas so large he could cut mountains in half. Actually, I think he only had 1 katana. I'm gonna look this up. You won't believe this. The reason I was confused is because apparently Kishimoto is as well. Sometimes he has 2, sometimes he has 1. It's good to know my brain still works. Now, the conventionally accepted answer to who had the strongest Susanoo of all time is Kakashi, and I do tend to agree with that line of thinking. I mean, Kakashi's Susanoo heavily incorporates the usage of Kamui. He's able to use things like Kamui Shuriken the size of school buses that he can throw between dimensions. Let's say you're about to block one, he can simply just have it pop into the Kamui dimension and pop out behind you. That's very broken. And when you consider the fact that we just acknowledged the fact that the Kamui is the strongest MS ability in existence, it's pretty hard to look at a Susanoo that incorporates said ability and be like, oh, yeah, that's not the strongest. However, I'd like to divert a little bit from the standard talking points. See, because while yes, Kakashi Susanoo is probably the strongest Susanoo we've ever seen, that's only because Itachi never got EMS. See, Itachi Susanoo, when used by a sick and dying man, was enough to protect him from something like Kiri. The Magatama generated by Itachi Susanoo was also strong enough to help Naruto and Killer Bee in the destruction of a Chubaku Tensei black hole, the gravity well at the center of a Chubaku Tensei. You know, the thing that Nagato and other Rinnegan wielders are able to do that makes big old meteorites? And in that moment, it's basically implied that the Magatama that he threw at that gravity well were equal in destructive power to the tailed beast bomb that Killer Bee fired and the Rasen Shuriken that Naruto threw. But here's the thing. The fact that Itachi Susanoo even had a ranged option is incredibly unfair. See, well, it's not unheard of that a Susanoo will have both melee and ranged options, as both Madara and Sasuke had both. Madara and Sasuke's weapons were just that. Weapons. While Madara was able to generate Magatama just like Itachi, his katana, while able to cut a mountain in half, was just a katana. Itachi's sword was a bit different. Itachi's sword, and say it with me now everybody, was the Sword of Totsuka, a literal one-hit kill. And while you could make the argument that a sword that can cut a mountain in half is also probably a one-hit kill, if for some reason the person that Madara hit with the sword didn't die, well, then it's not a one-hit kill. Not really an option for Itachi, because the second that Itachi is able to pierce somebody with the Sword of Totsuka, they're sealed away in the sake gourd that acts has its sheath. And within that sake gourd is a pocket dimension referred to as the realm of drunken dreams. Tie that into the fact that in Itachi's other hand, he has the Yada mirror, which is able to reflect all physical and spiritual attacks, meaning any ninjutsu, genjutsu, or taijutsu that hits that shield is not only repelled, but sent back. And you have one of the strongest Susanos of all time that unfortunately only looked weak in its battle against Sasuke because Kirin uses literal lightning, and therefore the Yada mirror couldn't reflect it. However, if it didn't use literal lightning, Itachi would have just sent it back. So while, yes, Kakashi Susanoo is the strongest out of all of the Susanos we've ever seen, it's only because Itachi's never got legs or wings. Oh my god, could you imagine if Itachi did a majestic attire Susanoo with Kurama? And that's it. All of the abilities of the Sharingan and the best users of each ability. Like I said, every single ability from the Sharingan has a different person who's the best at it. And technically, the only important Sharingan wielder who isn't on this list is Madara. However, if we were to create an additional category like longevity or stamina, that would very easily go to Madara. So a Madara may not be the best of all time in any individual subcategory of the Sharingan. He's A, at least second in every single subcategory, and B, by far and away the man with the most stamina out of any Sharingan wielder we've ever seen. No other person on this list could even dream of using their MS for 24 hours. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with my placements of the Sharingan wielders and their individual subclasses? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. May or may not have brought up the Madara thing because I knew people are going to be like, how does Madara not win any of these